Well, hello and welcome. This is the 7th class in our Accelerated Growth Program, and just to give you an idea of where you're at, currently you are working on your empowerment log. You've been doing this for the last couple of classes now, and you should have plenty of ammunition. And today we're going to talk to you about some of the things you need to know that will help you take all this information that you're gaining from your empowerment log and move from step 4 to step 5. So here you are now. Here's your empowerment log. Remember that your empowerment log is about keeping track of when you are getting a lot of one particular need and when you are getting not very much of it at all, and kind of comparing those times with each other. So an example is this one that I have here where I was working on the need to have a sense of confidence and capability. And I have many entries here where I feel varying different degrees of confidence and capability. And there's a lot of things that I noticed about that. So one thing I noticed was that they tend to be triggered by either accomplishing things or failing at things, or at least my perception that I'm accomplishing or failing things. The strength tends to vary based on how I'm processing my accomplishments or my failures. So it actually turns out that my thoughts are working against me. What I learned from my empowerment log is that when I placed too much importance on an accomplishment or a failure, and I got my confidence from that, it didn't work very well at all. But when I looked at accomplishments as something that I could savor, but only as one small step so that I could enjoy but also be properly humble about, that I was able to take it in. And that allowed me to increase my confidence and really savor my accomplishments in a way that I hadn't been able to before. That shift was really powerful for me and made a big difference. But there are a lot of other things that will make a big difference as you're going through your empowerment log and noticing that you're blocking your needs in some way, often with your thoughts. It gives you the first sense that this thing that you have here that you haven't been able to get met is actually much more abundant in the world for you than you previously thought it to be. And that can be extremely empowering, which is why we call it the empowerment log. Now what I want to do is kind of do a review on some of the things that are at play here underneath and why it's so important to do this empowerment log, to kind of feel your way through it and experience your way through it, and then what you can get out of it. Okay, so we talked about how when we're a baby and we first begin to realize that our needs are not going to automatically be met in the world, that we need to learn to survive. And as a baby, we need to learn very quickly what it is that we need to survive and how we're going to get those needs met. And as a baby, we don't have a lot of power in the world. We need our parents or caregivers to be with us to give us what we need. But as we grow, we begin to grow a sense of capability, and we learn how to get many of our own needs met. However, no matter what kind of a family you grew up in, there are some needs, especially in the love and belonging arena, that we didn't do such a good job of figuring out how to get met. And it made us feel vulnerable. So for any given need, though, once we've figured out how to get it met, it feels abundant in the world. And the threat of it going away temporarily doesn't bother us. We know there's plenty to go around, and we feel capable of getting as much as we need. So we open ourselves to it and give and receive it freely. So this is really important to understand. No matter who you are, there's going to be some things in the world that you need to survive that feel abundant to you. If love feels abundant to you, you're probably a very affectionate person and you give and receive love freely. If love does not feel abundant to you, you're probably much more mistrustful in your relationships and you're a little bit more tentative about them. You don't necessarily give your love or receive it as freely. what ends up happening is if we struggled to get something as a child, and we'd sometimes get our hopes up only to be disappointed, we feel that these particular needs are scarce in the world, at least for us. Maybe we're not good enough or something. We try to figure out how to survive, how to get just a little bit, and how to protect ourselves from the disappointment of getting our hopes up and then having the rug pulled out from under us. So we become mistrustful and dismissive or desperate and emotional when we notice how scarce it is. So no matter what it is, I mean, it's always great to use the example of water or air because it's so obvious. If you're dying of thirst and there's no water anywhere, you're going to start feeling very desperate. You're also going to feel mistrustful if somebody freely gives you water if you're in an environment where you know water to be scarce. And that's the way many of us feel about money. The way many of us feel about love, the way many of us feel about getting support or help. It's usually whatever we struggled with the most as a child that comes up as a pattern again. So a few videos ago, we talked about the pattern, and what ends up happening is we react. So when we notice that something we need is scarce, we tend to have a reaction that's a trigger. So this is just a slide that kind of shows what an adult trigger looks like, and it's in the workbook. But I don't think I'm going to go into it this much other than all reactions are ugly, but they're also signs, and they help us no matter whether it's grief or frustration or boredom or even exhaustion, exasperation. All of these tend to be our red flags, and that's how we started the whole process with your trigger log. But let's move on to our multi-level belief model, which I already showed you in another video, but I just want to go over with you again now because now you're going to take a look at your empowerment log and start trying to find your own pattern. Sometimes I will call this multi-level belief model a multi-level belief model. Sometimes I call it the circle of growth, and sometimes I call it the puzzle. And right now I'm going to call it the puzzle because we all have 2 or 3 of these puzzles, and figuring them out can be really helpful. So at the very beginning, at the bottom circle here, your unmet needs are what you learned were scarce in the world, but that you need to survive. You feel vulnerable and self-protective. They feel like very thin patches in an otherwise solid foundation. Whenever it's brought to your attention that you have less of this than you need, you feel threatened and you go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. Okay? Because you feel that these things are scarce in the world, at least for you, then you develop a belief that tells you why it's scarce for you. So an example of this that we haven't talked about much on these videos is that a lot of times when we don't get something as a child, our perspective as a child is that the world revolves around us. So if our parents neglected us in some way, and they're always going to neglect us in some way because they don't know what it's like to be in our heads, they can only guess, and they're not always going to be paying close attention to us. So our parents are going to not meet our needs sometimes for sure, no matter how attentive they are to us. And if they're over attentive, then they can have a negative effect kind of going the opposite way as well. Like we might not have a need for independence or autonomy if our parents are paying too much attention to our needs. They might not allow us the independence of meeting our own needs. So, there's really no way to get out of this. Having a good family is not going to protect you against having some unmet needs in your life. But what ends up happening is that when you're young and you're trying to get something like love or attention and it's not coming to you, and you try to think of a reason why, it's very unlikely that you're going to think, gosh, mom and dad are working really hard jobs and they're really busy all the time, and that's why they're grumpy and they yell at me sometimes. You're going to always think that the reason you get yelled at is because of you. And that's the first problem with coming up with beliefs when you're about 3 years old, is because everything's about you, because you don't know to think about it any other way. You've never been an adult before, so you don't know what it's like to be in the shoes of your parents. So you have no way to think about it any other way. So typically you're going to come up with a belief that mom and dad are treating me badly, or mom and dad are not giving me this attention or love, or they're ignoring me, or whatever it is, because I'm not good enough, or because I'm not important, or because I don't deserve it. And so you make it about yourself. And so your scarcity belief is usually some form of, I don't get to have love, or I don't get to have all the good things everybody else gets because there's something wrong with me. It doesn't necessarily have to be about you. It could be about other people in the world. I don't get to have this because everyone in my world is an idiot. Everyone else in my family are complete idiots. That's why I don't get to have what I want. Or you might come up with, I don't get to have what I want because this world is a scary place, right? So your beliefs could be about yourself. They could be about other people. They could be about the world. But often they're about you. Often they're about you thinking that you don't deserve to get the need met, that people will treat you a certain way because of you. And that's kind of the first fatal, incorrect assumption that we make when we're a kid that probably hurts us more than anything else as we grow up, is making the assumption that when people treat you a certain way, it's because of you, not because of them. So we could sit and talk and discuss that for a very long period of time, but just let that sink in for a minute, because that is important. And if it does sink in, that also gives you the key to unraveling all these traps we get into ourselves into as we get older. Typically, as a kid, you're going to have decided that the reason whatever it is scarce for you, that some form of love or belonging or being valued or accepted or whatever it is because of you. Because you aren't good enough, because you haven't done something that you need to do. And so when you come up with your survival belief, what you decide has to be done in order for you to get what is scarce in the world is usually something that you do to change yourself in some way. And your survival strategy is the expression of that behavior. And the collateral damage is the consequences. And this is going to be a lot easier to understand if I give you an example. So let's go through one. So let's say you have an unmet need of love, support, and acceptance. Your scarcity belief is people won't give me these things unless I earn them, right? So we're basically saying that we only get love unless we deserve love. So your survival belief is your idea about what makes you deserve love. And in this case, we use an example of, if I'm the best friend ever to everyone else, that's what's going to get me love. So now I develop a survival strategy, and the survival strategy is that I have to be the best friend ever. So I make sure people like me. I become the best listener in the world. I become the easiest friend to have. I don't ever lean on my friends too much, and I'm always there for them. That's my survival strategy. I find that works. That makes me pretty appealing, and people will like me. But I never get to really be myself authentically with my friends because I don't ever want to be a pain to them. So I never really let myself completely out. And the collateral damage is exhaustion and resentment when my kindness to others isn't reciprocated, constantly agreeing to do things for others that I really don't want to do, and, a general feeling of being deprived of really being cared for by others. So if I came to coaching, I might try to force myself to be more assertive or to be more selfish in my relationships, but it would be impossible for me to do as long as I have that scarcity belief that people won't give me love, support, and acceptance unless I'm that best friend ever. This is why the only thing you can do to undo the collateral damage is to identify the scarcity belief and undo that. Let's go over another example. So same unmet needs, love, support, and acceptance, but in this case, and the same scarcity belief, I have to earn them, but in this case, I came up with another way to earn my love, and that is to become a high performer. So this is an example that we actually did in an earlier video. and I become a high achiever. I get promotions. I'm very successful in the world. And although I say that I want family balance, I can't bring myself to settle down and spend time with my family. I'm always restless when I'm home or on vacation because all I can think about is work. All I can think about is the next achievement, the next promotion, the next thing I need to do. The thing with your survival strategy is because you believe that the thing you need is scarce, your survival strategy, you can never really let up on it. So you tend to be obsessed with it. More obsessed with it when you're stressed out than when you're feeling good. So when your survival strategy is working, you're actually pretty relaxed and life actually feels pretty good. People have the biggest meltdowns when their survival strategy stops working. But either way, even if things are going well and your survival strategy is working, typically you're not going to be able to rest from your survival strategy for a long period of time. Because as soon as things go wrong, your survival strategy is going to kick into gear again. Let's see if we have another example. Now, this is someone who came up not with a scarcity belief about themselves, but about other people. So same unmet needs, love, support, and acceptance. But in this case, it was that other people can't be trusted to be considered or supported, which means I'm on my own. I have to do it all myself. I can't allow myself to lean on or depend on others. So this survival strategy is different. It's take everything on, don't delegate, handle everything at all costs so nothing falls through the cracks. This person turns into a very controlling a controlling person, maybe a micromanager. They did not decide that the reason their parents didn't give them whatever it is that they needed to get from their parents was because of them. They decided it was because people can't be trusted. People are self-serving. They can't lead on people. So they developed a different survival belief and a different survival strategy. Still a lot of collateral damage, constant anger and disappointment in others, being a micromanager, being exhausted, feeling all alone and unsupported, feeling like you can't rest. So tons of collateral damage. Again, we tend to complain about micromanagers at work. We try to get them to stop micromanaging. The reason they can't stop micromanaging is they feel like if things go out of control, they won't survive. It's so primitive. So it's almost impossible to get a micromanager to quote unquote stop micromanaging until they can get assured that whatever it is that they're scared of, won't blow up and that everything will be okay. So it takes a little bit of managing a micromanager if you have a boss that's a micromanager, but that's a tangent. So these are examples of the puzzle, different versions of it, and your job is to kind of think through this and find yours. So keep in mind that our scarcity beliefs are at the core of all the negative patterns in our lives. We engage in behavior patterns that cause collateral damage. But since in our minds these behavior patterns are the only way to get even a small scrap of what we need to survive, we will never, ever stop engaging in them. That, by the way, is why people go on diets over and over again and they never lose weight. They never can stick to the diet for a long period of time because it's a survival strategy. And sometimes it's hard to see how the diet can be a survival strategy, just like it's hard to see how micromanaging can be a survival strategy. But that's why you have to go deeper to these deeper levels, because you're never going to even figure out what the survival strategy is protecting you from unless you go down and you learn about these things. And the only way that I've ever known to figure these things out is to use the trigger log to identify the unmet needs, and then to use the empowerment log to start identifying the scarcity beliefs, which is what you're doing right now. So for example, high achievers, I get this all the time. You can get all the time management techniques in the world, but if your survival strategy is to achieve at all costs and never stop to rest, you will not ever stop to rest, no matter how often you tell yourself that you don't need to achieve. The same holds true if you're a people pleaser. or you explode when you're frustrated, or you're constantly worried about what others think of you, or you exhaust yourself in other ways. So the behaviors that you exhibit that cause collateral damage and get in the way of you actually being able to live the life you want are all based in a scarcity belief. And the only way to change anything is to turn that scarcity belief into an abundance belief. So that's what we'll be doing next in our abundance log. One thing that I want to really point out and make sure that you're clear on is that while we're looking for scarcity beliefs, what you may end up finding is that you're just identifying beliefs that reinforce your survival strategy. Okay? So an example of that is you may decide that you have a belief that says, I'm not good enough, right? So you have a scarcity belief that says, I will not be loved unless I'm good enough, and I deserve it, but I'm not good enough. So your survival belief is, what is the way that I have to be good enough? Well, I have to achieve to be good enough. So then you go to your survival strategy. And then when you kind of look at your beliefs and you decide what beliefs you want to change, you try to change I'm not good enough into I am good enough. Well, I am good enough is not an abundance belief. I am good enough is taking a survival belief and saying that I'm good at my survival strategy. Because if my survival strategy is being good enough and I'm trying to create a belief that says I am good enough, all I'm really doing is reinforcing my survival strategy. That's a pitfall that you might fall into when you get from moving into your empowerment log to your abundance log. People always will naturally fall back to trying to strengthen their survival strategy. Every time you go talk to a coach or try to work on your self-development, what your brain is going to tell you to do is work on reinforcing your survival strategy, because you believe that you need to do this really well in order to survive. What we want to get to is your scarcity beliefs. We want to turn those into abundance beliefs so you don't need a survival strategy. And that's the only way you get rid of the collateral damage. All right. This is just sort of repeating what I just said. Let's look at your empowerment log. What you're really going to want to look at is your thought patterns, your thoughts and how your thoughts are working against you. And what you're going to try to do is identify your puzzle. What does your puzzle look like from all of that? So we are now on reflection paragraph number 2. And again, this doesn't have to be a paragraph. You could draw your puzzle. You could draw your multi-layered belief model or your circles. What you want to be noticing is how your thinking patterns block you from getting your needs met. What do you say to yourself that dismisses or discounts the source when someone actually gives me some of the need? How do I refuse to give myself what I most need? But what I also want you thinking about is, what are my scarcity beliefs? What are my survival beliefs? What are my survival strategies? I want you to reflect on all of that. This is deep work, and sometimes it requires discussion. So being in an accelerated growth class and talking and listening to other people talk and listening to other people figure this out often will give you clues and help you figure it out for yourself. Talking to me about it if we have a coaching session, or talking to your mentor about it if you are working with a mentor. These are all things that you can work with us on. It's not something you can usually discover in isolation. Even me, because I created this whole program and went through it myself, I only made tons of progress in it when I shared it with my clients and helped them go through it. And in those discussions, as I was helping them go through it, I had breakthrough after breakthrough after breakthrough in my own work, because I would hear them going through something and I'm like, oh wow, I went through something similar, and on and on and on. So now you are moving to reflection paragraph number 2. You should be taking everything that you've learned in your empowerment log and reflect on all the things that we discussed here in this class, and journal for a little while. Journal, write bullets, try to draw your model here, your multi-level, I call this the multi-level belief model or the puzzle. Draw yours. And Once you get some good reflection going, then we'll be moving to the next step and starting your abundance log. So have fun with this, and I look forward to talking with you again soon.